If you want to see what I'm up to or what I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram, and the links will be pinned in the comments and in the description. Thank you. This case takes place in the United States of America, and possibly spans over a number of years. Darren Deon Vann was born on the 21st of March 1971 in the city of Gary, Indiana. Darren's past is shrouded in mystery, and there is little information regarding his childhood and early life. However, he did have a half-brother named Reginald and a sister. According to numerous sources, Darren and Reginald moved around a lot throughout their youth. Darren spent a while living in Cherry Point, North Carolina throughout his 20s before moving back to Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana was once a vital city in the United States, playing a key role in the nation's steel production. It was a bustling city in the early 20th century and experienced rapid growth and development. However, in the 1960s, the population began to decline, and the local industry suffered a major collapse, mainly due to the emergence of cheaper steel manufacturing overseas. By the 1990s, the city and its surrounding areas succumbed to a phenomenon called the Rust Belt decay. As a result, violent crime increased. 10,000 vacant properties in a city of around 80,000 people. Many of these houses were overgrown by bushes and trees. The citizens of the city expressed a desire to have them demolished due to the impact that they had on the city's aesthetics and cleanliness. These very same residents were to become even more infuriated and horrified when they realized what Darren Vann had used them for. In 1991, Darren joined the USA Marine Corps and served for no more than 2 years. Darren was trained as a Hawk missile systems operator. However, his military career was cut short, with his record stating that he received an other-than-honorable discharge. The details of this discharge are unclear. However, his record stated that he failed to live up to the expectations and standards. Historically, these violations have been security violations, arrests, assaults, abuse of authority, or drug violations. Darren only ever held the rank of private, but was commended with a National Defense Service Medal. Darren returned to Cherry Point after his military duties, and in 1993, records show that Darren was arrested. Although the details of his arrest were unspecified, and it remains unknown what exactly he was arrested for. By this time, it became evident that Darren was a troubled individual with a tendency for breaking laws and rules. After 1993, Darren was working various security roles and met a lady called Maria through a mutual friend. By 1995, he and Maria got married. Maria was 54 years old, and Darren was 24 when they married. This made Darren's integration into the family difficult, as Maria had a son who was a young adult himself. His name was Edward Matlock. Edward would later say that he wasn't comfortable or happy with his mother's marriage. He did say that some of it was due to the age difference between the couple, but then there were Edward's observations. Darren talked to himself a lot, and sometimes seemed lost in thought. He said that Darren had many strange habits and struggled to hold eye contact, always looking down at the ground. Edward thought that he was a quote, nutcase, and said that he would never allow him near his kids because of how much Darren freaked him out. In addition to this, Darren and Maria moved to a rough part of Austin, Texas, known for its crime, and something that Edward did not approve of. According to Edward, Darren's strange behavior intensified when he lost his job. After losing his job, Darren and Maria relocated from Austin back to Gary. They settled down in a rundown house in a neighborhood plagued by poverty. As time passed, Darren and Maria's relationship took a turn for the worse, and they broke up. In the early 2000s, Darren found himself a new girlfriend called Saritha. Their relationship reportedly started well, with Darren charming her with his intellect and chilled temperament. During an interview, she said that he was very smart, and his idea of a night out was to go to Barnes & Noble and read books, mostly science fiction or Harry Potter. But once he had won Saritha over, things began to change. Around the 6-month mark, Darren became very possessive. His deep insecurities led him to believe that she was going to leave him. Because of this, he would have her by his side wherever he went. Saritha couldn't leave him even if she tried, and if Darren had to go out alone, he would lock her in their apartment. Once he locked her in there for a whole week, only seeing her 3 times a day to give her food. She would later tell the police that Darren once hogtied her at her own mother's home. He would do this when he would go to work to ensure that Saritha couldn't run away. He would leave her restrained for hours at a time. He even threatened to kill her once when she refused to sleep with him, saying that he could easily make her disappear. Saritha felt that she couldn't leave him because he had extended the death threats to her mother. His gaslighting, controlling and bullying nature knew no bounds, and he always blamed her when things went wrong in his own life. His abuse crescendoed 9 months into their relationship, on the 6th of April 2004. Saritha kept going round to her friend's house, a man called David Abram. She went over to him numerous times as she was fed up with Darren's controlling ways, and this was a haven for her. At the time, she was doing her best to call things off with Darren. Her friend David was wheelchair-bound due to an injury he suffered once when he was in a shootout, resulting in paralysis. He was a dear friend of Saritha's, and he wouldn't have been a threat to Darren if the couple were to stay together. However, Darren was not happy with this. On 3 separate occasions, he marched around to David's house to hurl abuse and to threaten him, only doing this when Saritha wasn't there. On the 3rd time, Darren didn't come empty-handed. He came armed with a red plastic gasoline canister full of petroleum and a lighter. He also claimed that he had a stick of dynamite. He threatened David by saying that he was going to blow up his home. The two exchanged words through a window. David pleaded with Darren, asking him not to burn down or blow up his house, as he had his innocent family inside. Saritha eventually turned up to David's house, but this was not helpful. David threw her some keys so she could let herself back inside and lock the door behind her, preventing Darren from coming in. Saritha was terrified, so she ran and hid under his bed. This infuriated Darren, so he kicked down the door to David's house and began pouring gasoline all over the floor and furniture. Saritha confronted Darren, but before she knew it, she was forced into a headlock. The police soon arrived on the scene, but this did not stop Darren. With Saritha still in a headlock, the two stumbled out of the house, and Darren proceeded to pour what was left of the canister over himself and Saritha. She was drenched from the shoulders down, and Darren poured it over his face like a crazed psychopath. Darren was photographed by the police outside David's home, choking Saritha with his left arm and holding the canister in the right. He reached for his lighter and began flicking it, threatening to burn them alive. The neighborhood buildings were evacuated, and eventually the police were able to apprehend him. The scene must have been incredibly intense and completely horrifying. Thankfully, nobody was physically harmed. Darren was subsequently charged with a D-class felony, which usually leads to a 5 to 10 year prison sentence, and are classed as serious crimes. Darren's crime was to conspire to commit arson and aggravated assault. However, Darren only spent 90 days in jail. In retrospect, this was seen as a real injustice and a grave mistake by the authorities. This very dangerous man was soon on the loose again. When Darren was released, his mental and physical aggression towards women continued. At some point after his release, Darren went back to Austin, Texas. In December of 2007, an unnamed 25-year-old Hispanic lady of the night was told by her employer to meet a client by the name of Big Boy Appetite at an apartment. Big Boy Appetite was the pseudonym adopted by Darren when he used escort sites. When Darren met up with the escort, she was on the phone with her employer. This overwhelmed him with paranoia, and he accused the escort of being an undercover police officer. The lady tried to reason with Darren, saying that it was just her boss and that she wasn't an undercover policewoman, but this was to no avail. Darren advanced towards her and shouted that he could kill her if he wanted to. Soon after, when he had calmed down, Darren demanded that she perform an act upon him. The woman could see that Darren was clearly unhinged, and she rejected his demands. This resulted in Darren unleashing a vicious attack, striking her several times in the face. Darren then gripped her in a chokehold and proceeded to force himself upon her. Luckily for the lady, she saw an opportunity and made an escape. She rang the police instantly. It was clear from the marks on her neck that she had been strangled. Darren was soon arrested and was charged with aggravated SA. A grand jury indicted him in July of 2008. Darren pleaded guilty and he was convicted in September of 2008. He was sentenced to 5 years in a state penitentiary. According to court documents, in August of 2009, Darren's wife Maria filed for an official divorce, citing an irretrievable breakdown as the reason. The divorce was finalized in 2010 after Darren failed to appear at the court proceedings as he was in prison in Texas at the time. Despite this and his heinous crimes, Maria gave interviews in recent years where she claimed that Darren was not an aggressive man towards her. She claimed that Darren had never mistreated her when they were together, and that he was always, quote, okay. Darren was released on the 5th of July 2013. He had to register as a sex offender in prison, and then told officials that he would be moving back to Gary, Indiana. By this point, Darren had a checkered history of ambiguous law and rule-breaking, and now 2 examples of attacks on women. Common sense would suggest that this record of abuse would deem him a threat to women and a possibly predatory person. But no. Texan authorities, in all their wisdom, alerted their colleagues in Lake County, Indiana, that Darren was to be considered a low-risk offender. This misappropriation would soon allow Darren to continue his escalating crimes against women. Darren returned to Gary and lived on East 50th Court, near his brother Reginald and his sister. Darren divided his time between his house and his sister's home. His street was characterized by single-story housing, most of which were vacant and overgrown with vegetation. The city of Gary was soon to become the scene for some of the most gruesome attacks on women. A local 28-year-old lady called Tara Beatty was last seen on the 13th of January 2014 as she went to go and meet a friend. Tara was born in Chicago and moved to St. Paul when she was a child before moving to Gary in 2004. She and her lifelong partner and fiancé Marvin Clinton lived together in Gary, and they had a 2-year-old son. Tara was known to be a good mother despite her mental challenges. She was diagnosed with bipolar, schizophrenia, and depression. Because of this, she had a difficult life, and she had already had 2 baby girls taken away from her by the state. Tara's mother Gloria described her as a vulnerable person who was very trusting of others and strangers. Her ethos was that if she didn't hurt anybody, nobody would hurt her. Tara and Marvin were working on their wedding plans and the future was looking bright. On the 13th of January 2014, Tara popped out to see a friend. As she was walking to meet her friend, she passed Darren on the street. According to some sources, on this day Darren was angry due to unrelated issues. Later in a police interview, Darren claimed that he had to relieve something from inside of him. He then attacked Tara in a vicious, unprovoked, and random attack, resulting in her losing her life. The details of this attack are not known. However, Darren later admitted to forcing himself on her before strangling her to death. As I mentioned earlier, there were many abandoned houses in the city of Gary, and Darren used this to his advantage. He planted her lifeless body in one of these abandoned houses. He placed her under a wooden bench in a room with a door propped shut using a dresser. When Tara didn't come home that night, her family and her boyfriend waited patiently. 3 days would pass before the family informed the police. A search was soon underway, but the trivial police investigation lacked manpower and couldn't get to the bottom of Tara's disappearance. Her boyfriend Marvin was not happy with the police force's lack of effort, so he started looking through abandoned houses for Tara. He reportedly searched 30 houses before the police force told him that he had to stop, as the houses were deemed unsafe to enter. Her disappearance would continue to be a mystery for some time, and her family was left in disarray, overcome with worry. The police suspected that she had run away from her life in Gary. Marvin knew that his girlfriend was troubled, but he said, "Tara would not leave her son like that. She was loving, kind, a big-hearted person. She was the kind of person who would give you her coat to wear if you didn't have one." Marvin struggled to explain to their son what had happened. Little did anyone know in the city of Gary that Darren had made his first official kill, and it wouldn't be long before he made his second. In the same month of January 2014, Darren came across a woman named Tanya Gatlin, a 27-year-old mother. Tanya was known to be full of life and a lovely woman, although struggled with 10 years of addiction. Unfortunately, in January of 2014, she went missing. Darren didn't always premeditate his killings. He later said in a police interview that his killings were random. The details of Tanya's death are not exactly clear, as only her skeletal remains were found. However, Darren's MO was clear: kill at random whenever he felt himself becoming overwhelmed with pressure, then use the abandoned, dilapidated housing as the cover for the murders. Tanya's body would later be found in an abandoned house. The next victim would be Christine Williams. Christine was 36 years old and was a resident of Gary at the time of her disappearance. Like other victims that Darren murdered, she was prone to disappearing every now and then, typical for a person troubled with addiction. Christine was a mother of 4 to 3 fathers, but all of her children were taken away from her and put up for adoption. What was uncovered through police interviews was that Darren allegedly sold illegal substances to Christine. On the street, Christine was known as Casper and was a known street worker, or at least according to Darren. He claimed that he had not seen her in a while, and this was since giving her $40 worth of illegal substances which she was supposed to pay him for. Darren saw this as disrespectful, and he went looking for her. When Darren found her, he claimed that she got in the way of his anger, and that she was to become another one of his, quote, mistakes. Christine's body would later be found in the basement of an abandoned house in Gary. The autopsy results would later show that she died from injuries due to strangulation, and was likely killed sometime in September of 2014, but it isn't exactly clear when this happened. Darren would often use a website called Backpage to organize encounters with escorts. One victim that was advertised on Backpage was 43-year-old Tracy Martin. Tracy Martin's mother Linda would later say that from a young age Tracy was bright and had a promising future ahead of her. She was caring, smart, and beautiful. However, tragically, her life didn't turn out the way her mother would have hoped. Tracy's life became characterized by poor decisions and tragedy. In 1998, she lost a child to cancer at the age of 5. This destroyed her and her wider family. To cope, Tracy turned to drugs, and she became an addict. Like many people plagued with addiction, she became a familiar face at her local penitentiary, and when she wasn't in jail, she would work the streets. Sometime before the 4th of July 2014, Darren had found her profile on Backpage and asked to meet her for a hookup. Tracy agreed, but unfortunately the encounter turned sour. It isn't exactly clear what happened, but Darren strangled and suffocated Tracy to death. Again, he left her body in one of the many abandoned houses in Gary. Once her family realized she was missing, they contacted the police. However, it seems that little effort was put into locating her. All of these murders were in close succession and occurred within a few months. The next victim was Anith Jones. She was last seen on the 8th of October 2014. Anith Jones was a 35-year-old woman known as the favourite sister and everybody's favourite aunt. Anith was a kind and loving woman who was to become entangled in a plot to kill. Although this time, Darren would later confess that this murder was premeditated and planned. Darren would later tell detectives that he was offered $300 in cash and $200 in illegal substances to kill Anith. It was one of Darren's friends who had ordered the hit, and he was struggling in a court case whereby Anith played a pivotal role. Both Darren and his friend tricked Anith, pretending that they required her for professional services. Anith drove her 2001 Chevrolet Prism to an abandoned house, which was organised to be the meeting spot. Inside, Darren had intercourse with Anith, before wrapping a thin cord around her neck for 5 minutes, strangling her to death. Darren would leave her corpse in one of the abandoned houses and covered her body with old teddy bears and tires that he found at the property. Darren's horrific killing spree would soon come to an end, but first he took the life of one more woman. Darren logged back onto the website Backpage to find himself another victim. His last known victim would mark the end of his terror on the community of Gary, and possibly even further afar. The case which led to his arrest was the murder of Africa Hardy, a 19-year-old woman. Africa had recently moved back to Chicago after graduating from high school and living for 5 years with her mother in Aurora, Colorado. She moved to Chicago to live with other relatives, but also, when Africa returned to Chicago, she started an escorting agency with her friend, which serviced the wider Lake County area. This came as a shock to her mother when she found out, and she said that she wasn't raised in such a way. Her mother would later say that she had an infectious personality and her smile was contagious. She also said that Africa never met a stranger, she loved everybody. But she continued and followed up by saying that Africa was a little naive and trusted people too easily. She struggled as a late teen, but always had her eye set on going back to school and one day perhaps giving back to people. Her cousin later said that she would have loved to open up a daycare, as Africa loved children, but the company she kept prevented that dream from becoming true. According to an affidavit, her partner and friend who remains anonymous told Africa that a man with the username Big Boy Appetite required her services, the very same name that Darren would use when he was online looking for escorts. According to the documents, Africa's friend stated that she received a text message in October of 2014 indicating that Darren was with her in a motel called Motel 6. The events that transpired are not documented perfectly. However, the chilling evidence suggests a brutal end. Africa was found naked in a bathtub with the shower running. Darren had strangled her with a thin cord, as per the thin red lines around her neck. The room had broken fingernails on the floor, suggesting that there was a struggle. A shirt button was found on the floor, accompanied by a torn condom wrapper. The bed was messed up and away from the wall. Darren later told the police that at one point the intercourse was getting rough and she started to fight with him. So he strangled her first with his bare hands and then with a thin cord before placing her body in the bathtub of the motel room. The friend explained that when Africa went beyond the usual duration for an appointment, she attempted to contact her by calling her cell phone as many as 8 times without a response. Her friend was deeply concerned. She sent a text message to Africa's phone and received a reply, but the reply made no sense. The message didn't sound like Africa. She suspected that the man might have been the one who responded. Subsequently, her friend contacted another friend, and together They went to the motel room, where they discovered Africa's body. Upon discovering the chilling crime scene, they called the emergency services, and the police were on the lookout for Africa's killer. Video surveillance footage of the motel captured Darren getting out of a dark SUV and entering Africa's room around the time of the murder. Mobile phone records of the man who responded to Africa's advertisement under the name Big Boy Appetite led the police to an address in Gary. This eventually led to the arrest of Darren Deon Vann on the 18th of October 2014. This day marked the end of Darren's heinous crimes, but the beginning of a journey of discovery, which the police and the people of Gary were not prepared for. During Darren's initial interviews regarding the murder of Africa, Darren took the opportunity to confess to other murders. Darren systematically went through the murders of other victims: Tira Beatty, Tanya Gatlin, Christine Williams, Tracy Martin, Anith Jones, and Africa Hardy. All of the bodies of the women were found inside the abandoned homes. DNA testing of the crime scene uncovered that Tanya's remains were stashed with another victim, a woman named Sonia Billingsley. Sonia was born on the 27th of June 1961, making her 53 when she met her end. This made her an anomaly when it came to the demographic that Darren liked to target. Sonia went missing only weeks after Tara and Tanya on the 7th of February 2014. Tragically, Sonia left behind 5 daughters, 2 sisters, and 3 brothers, all of whom have stated that she will forever be a void missing in their lives. The total number of victims amounted to 7, or at least 7 confirmed kills. In an interview with the police on October the 18th, 2014, Darren referred to his killings as "my mistakes" and explained that episodes of rage led him to go looking for an out. Not only this, he identified these outs as including killings in California, Texas, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan, although he noted that he frequently visited Chicago. He later said to the police detectives that there were more in Illinois than there were in Indiana. The police desperately tried to piece together as many missing persons with the murders he was confessing to. In doing so, the police asked him about where he stayed whilst committing these crimes. Darren responded by saying, "I don't have anywhere to stay. I got on the train and I got on the bus. I'd know I'm losing it. I tried to get as far away from my family when I felt myself slipping." Unfortunately, despite these confessions, no more murders have been attributed to Darren Deon Vann.
Now with Casper, what she look like?
She's a Caucasian. Casper's about, 200. See, I'm not good with descriptions. She's like about this size. I don't know how you would describe a girl as this size. She's real thick.
Heavy set?
Blonde hair, yeah, heavy set. Some people say big BBW.
Well, how old?
I was going to say, Kara's can't. That's why I say she's anywhere from 28
You
to
said long
32.
blonde hair?
Yes. I don't know if it's blonde or brown. I'm colorblind, so.
All right.
So late 20s to early 30s?
She's 28 to 32. I'm not going to put her no older than
Okay.
that. If she is, I wouldn't think so.
Around what time would this have happened?
I'm trying to think. See, I can't be sure what time I killed Casper because I did some of those that same day.
Where'd you kill her at?
Oh, see, if I tell you that, y'all go to the house. I killed her in Gary. All these in Gary I'm giving you.
Okay, so Casper's a prostitute in Gary?
Yes.
Okay.
She's a prostitute in Gary. She's another one.
So Casper's body's inside of an abandoned house?
Right now, yeah.
Right now?
Right now.
On what street?
One is by, you know what Dora Miller is? I think it's Dora
Yeah.
Miller Projects. One is by Dora Miller. One is by, I want to say, 1, 2, 3 is by Georgia Street, William Park. One is by...
Has the one by Dory Miller been located?
No. They located a body, but it wasn't the right one. Well, it wasn't one of mine.
Okay. Where's the one in Dory Miller?
I don't know their streets like that, you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Inside of a building?
It's inside the house.
Are most of these inside of vacants?
Yes, most of these are inside vacant.
How, and I believe you, that you kind of want to put an end to this. And
Right, that's why I
stop
say it'd be
it.
easier just to be like, bam, if there's a house,
Would you
you're
be
gonna
willing-
have to move some
would,
stuff.
Would you be willing
You're gonna have
to,
to, because the police
to-
went in one house because they didn't move the right thing, they didn't find the body.
You're kidding.
Right.
but would you be willing to take us and, I mean, almost, I don't know, let's you call it like a field trip and just show us
I'd actually
Where
point
your-
the bodies off, right.
your work products at?
I don't really call it work. I call it my mistakes.
Your rages.
You know, my rages. When stuff don't go right, I go looking for an out. I usually try to go to Illinois where I have my guns. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
But if I don't have a way to get there, or I'm getting help, like right now I'm watching my sister kids, so if I get upset, I can't just leave, I'm on schedule. You see what I'm saying? And that schedule compresses how I do things.
What are the
What
things
does-
that cost you to go into a rage?
Last year, it's really, I can't work. They want 7 years, they want this. I went to get my ID, they won't give me my ID. It's just so much. I'm just like, I'm tired.
Does it do anything for you?
What? It releases, I want to say it releases pressure.
I guess what I'm asking, how does the rage, how do you connect the rage with these people that
They're
you
random.
kill?
They're random. All it does is take the wrong person to say something, or that's why I really can't give you Illinois, because Illinois probably has a whole lot of. They have more than Indiana, let's say that.
Do
They have way more than Indiana.
Where were you
Usually-
staying, where were you staying at over there?
I don't have to stay anywhere.
You were just,
I get on the train, I get on the bus, and I'll be like, I know I'm losing. I try to get far away from my family when I feel myself slipping.
yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever hurt anyone in your family?
I can't answer that because that would give you another state. You see what I'm saying? But yes.
Well, this is obviously gonna be somewhat difficult because we're gonna need some specific information and to be able to verify these and get you to where you're going.
Well, I gave you this one.
I don't think you're gonna have any problem.
Okay.
I mean,
I think
I just want to lay these arrests because these, I call these my mistakes because they did something that triggered my anger where I was already angered, but they really, like Casper was my friend. I didn't mean to kill her.
what led up to that?
I was already angry.
When do we go and recover her body?
I would do Casper part because she was my friend. She was a good person.
When do we do that?
That's why I said we could take that ride. That way you know the rest I'm trying to keep
Right.
with.
You realize what we're probably gonna do is we're gonna put you like in the belt that you're in now,
That's fine.
and we'll probably put you in some leg shackles. Cause this is not something we do every day.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I don't think you could leg check because I'm not going to be able to get down where Casper is.
You don't think you'll be able to direct us to it?
Okay.
Right.
Well, I mean, they're pretty decent. I mean, they're not short leg shackles. I mean,
Oh,
you'll be
okay,
able to.
that's fine.
And we, like I said,
Like I said,
I'm
not
from
gonna
the
give you
south.
no
I don't have to
problems.
go fast.
I'm not going to give you any problems. I'm
Right.
trying to get it.
Yeah, you're trying to put everything behind you.
Well, it's not really behind it. These I'm giving you because they wasn't supposed
You wanna
to be.
clear it up.
No, these weren't supposed to be people I killed.
Mm-hmm.
These were people that didn't have nothing to do with people hiring me to do something.
For the Motel 6, was that supposed to happen, or?
No, she struck me. If
And
she
that
hadn't
was just-
struck, that's it. I don't like being hit. Actually, I'm really surprised. I know why I ain't go off when your officers threw me down, because that's really one of my pets. I don't like people striking me or pushing me.
Darren was charged with 7 counts of murder and a series of other lesser crimes such as robbery. One of the other crimes he was charged with was in connection with an assault on an escort named Sarah. Court documents revealed that she identified Darren in a photo lineup as the man she accused of essaying and confining her to a boot of a car. According to her account, He punched and choked her until she was unconscious, then tied her up when she attempted to escape. He subsequently placed her in a car to drive across town. She managed to escape when the car stopped, and bystanders even came to her aid. The number of murders committed by Darren may be as high as 20 or even 30, with some sources saying more. This dark episode in Gary's history will forever be known as one of the main drivers in tearing down the old abandoned houses. Charities and governmental bodies all clubbed together to fund the demolition of the houses the women were found in. During the trial, the prosecution pushed for the death penalty. However, the notion was rejected. Whilst incarcerated during the trial, Darren was charged with another crime, as he threw feces and urine at a correctional officer in February of 2016. In May of 2018, Darren pleaded guilty to the 7 murders, and he was sentenced to 7 concurrent life sentences without the possibility of parole. Marvin Clinton, the partner of Tara Beatty, was relieved that Darren received a life sentence instead of the death penalty. He believes that the death penalty would have been the easy way out, and he wants Darren to suffer. What is incredibly tragic about this case is how easily many of the murders could have been avoided. A known dangerous man moved to a city and was somehow deemed as a low-risk offender. Numerous women went missing in quick succession, yet the authorities failed to act appropriately, likely due to the line of work that some of the women engaged in. Darren targeted these women for a reason. He knew full well that these women were vulnerable and that the police wouldn't come looking for them with the same amount of effort as other women.